Hello everyone and welcome back to the stream. It is Thursday the 27th of November. It is Thanksgiving in the US, but here in the UK it is just a rainy Thursday. It's about 2 p.m. here in the UK and it is work day. I've got a couple of things to chat through first. This is also going to be, we're not going to Pomodoro today. I will not be silent. This will be more of, for those who have been here for a long time. What we used to do, which is literally watching me work. Because I might have had, I don't think breakthrough is quite the word, but I think all of the work I've been doing has coalesced into knowing a bit more of what I'm doing. Before we talk about that though, let me pull this up so I remember all the things. Couple of things. First of all, you might have, well, not right now, it happens to be royalty-free music. You're gonna notice some non-royalty-free music in the background if you are watching this live. If you're watching this in the Twitch VOD or on YouTube, you're not gonna have any music in the background, and that means that you can provide your own music whilst you're working along with me if you wish to, and I can listen to the stuff I want to. I have done the thing where I filter the music out of my Twitch VOD. It's actually much simpler than I expected it to be. So that's done, and so we can listen to my actual studying playlist, which is mostly Final Fantasy music. I'm going to tell you that now. So enjoy. What else did I need to say? Obviously, I'm doing a bit better today. I went to campus 2 days in a row this week, which was very hard. So basically what I've been doing is I got fed up of waiting for my blood test, and I've been supplementing the stuff I'm deficient in. I'm going to stop doing that after tomorrow, and then it will probably have cleared out of my system. You can't hear my voice? It's going through. Hold on. It should be going through. I don't understand why it wouldn't be. Hold on. Okay, let's try that. Can you hear me now? The music's very quiet, so... Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna pretend that this is the start of the stream. Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. I've definitely not appeared on this camera before. It is the 27th of November. It is Thanksgiving in the US, but here it's just a rainy Thursday. What else did I say? It's 2 p.m. Well, it's now like 10 past 2 because I have in fact talked silently for 5 minutes. I'm looking for never appeared before today. Thank you so much. Damn it, I thought I had it all set up. All right, it might mean that I might end up having to clear the VOD of this so I don't get copyright struck, but we'll see. Maybe now that I've checked that extra box, it's working. Maybe actually, is it set up in a, let me just look at this. Twitch VOD track number 1. Audio. Interesting. Okay. I see I see how it works. Yeah, I was not, my microphone wasn't going through on one of the tracks, which is apparently the track it needed to be. Explaining that, because I explained it when I was apparently effectively muted, I've done the thing where my music doesn't go to my Twitch VOD and then also won't appear on the YouTube VOD. So if you're watching the now very messy Twitch VOD or the hopefully slightly cleaner YouTube VOD, if I bother to chop the start off, which doesn't always happen, you won't hear any music in the background, hopefully. if I've done it correctly, which apparently I hadn't. So I'm so glad you were here and told me. I would have streamed for so long with no microphone coming through. We are co-working today. We are going to be doing more of what we used to do. We're not doing silent Pomodoros, co-working kind of thing today. You're going to be getting to watch me do my work a bit more, because I've kind of in the past couple of weeks coalesced what the chapter's going to be about, and I have a submission deadline for my supervision, so that's going to go through the next week. I'll be writing that up. What was I saying? What was the other thing that I was saying? Oh yeah, I'm doing a bit better. That's what I was starting to say when it was pointed out that I was silent. Yeah, so I got fed up of waiting for my blood test. I've been taking the supplements for the thing that is causing me to be utterly trashed as opposed to like my usual level of trashed. And I'm going to stop that a few days before my blood test so that I can be back at the levels that I was at ish. I know it might affect it. I will tell my doctor that I've done this, but I couldn't survive the 3 full weeks between, until my blood test. That was not happening. They're very backed up. They're very backed up at my doctor's surgery. I don't know if it's the time of year that everyone needs blood tests or something. So yeah, I'm doing a bit better. I was on campus both Monday and Tuesday this week, because next week is also it's the start of December thing of everything happening at once. Next week is also my choir concert, where we will be performing for Valdis Gloria. No one who watches me is anywhere near Canterbury, but if you'd like to come to the University of Kent chorus and symphony orchestra concert, then you can. It's at the Gulbenkian on, is it the 8th, or it's like December, the first Saturday of December. So we had our normal rehearsal on the Monday, and then we also had rehearsal with the orchestra and the soloists on Tuesday, which was amazing. I love getting to hear just all of the orchestra are so good. And then most of the time in rehearsals, so we have choir risers, and the choir mostly sit like further up on the risers. On a normal rehearsal, I don't bother like decanting from my wheelchair and getting up there, which means that I have a very weird audio perspective on how things sound, because I actually hear the piano accompanist way more than we rehearse with piano. It's actually a harpsichord that he's going to be playing. Assuming it can stay in tune. It turns out the university has their own harpsichord, but my god, it like, you breathe in its vicinity and it goes out of tune. It was very funny watching the guy try to tune it whilst he was playing. Anyway, yeah, I normally don't sit like in the choir, but for like obviously the concert and for later rehearsals, I do like expend the spoons to move up and sit nearer them. And I couldn't actually manage the whole rehearsal there because the lowest riser, it's not the lowest one, the lower ones don't have backrests. That's actually bad for me. Because then I have to hold myself upright, and you're already having to, like, this is me sitting normally. If I was sitting because I was going to sing, I would be sat up like this so that, you've opened up your rib cage and stuff and your diaphragm is in the right place. But that's not how I sit most of the time. So I'm already needing to do that, and then I'm also having to hold myself up at the same time. I'm then having to I'm actually going to be practicing every day this week to try and get completely off book, because ideally when you're singing you want to be singing out this way, so you want your music up here. I can't hold it. It's not a heavy book, but I cannot hold it up here for the whole time. Yeah, like there's a lot going on, exactly. And basically the way I do these concerts is that any way I have to reduce how much physical expenditure it takes, the better it goes. And yeah, I love doing this. But I have to think about it a lot more, and it's hard work. And I have to breathe twice as much as everyone else because my breath doesn't go as far currently. But yeah, so I did that. I also got a bunch of work done. I got some notes down for what and I'll get into this more in a bit, but I got some notes down for the chapter and like the stuff that we're going to be writing up. I don't know what that sound was. And yeah, got some reading done and stuff. I then was a wreck yesterday. So I'm really glad that I had already decided, like, no, let's give myself a bit of a gap. I technically attended a union meeting, but in the sense that I was in bed and listening to it like it was a podcast. I sat up in order to take the notes I needed, because so it was a UCU, it was the like academic and professional staff union meeting, and I take information from there and then take it to the postgraduate board that I'm on with the students' union. So I was taking some notes for that, which were mostly what the fuck. There's a thing that you know how it's always like. So one of the problems we have at Kent is we've been in like years and years of restructuring, which is to say that they are making 90% of people redundant and then expecting 10% of people to do 100% of the work, kind of thing. And as they do this, replacement systems go into place that have not been thought through. So there's four, it's called academic advising here. Other universities call it tutor, like having a tutor that you see periodically, and they help make sure that, you know, everything's going okay for you academically. This is a very standard thing that is done in universities. And they've got a new system that it's going through, except that that system is completely separate to the staff schedule system, which is on Teams, which is completely separate to the student schedule system, which is on Moodle, which is that's the system we use for it. So both staff and students are having this system is automatically booking their academic advisory meetings at a time where the staff member is teaching and the student is in a class. And so also apparently at one point booked appointments for the previous day. I don't know if it's AI, but it's very bad. It's automated in some way, certainly. But yeah, so that's causing a massive hassle. So that's something I want to like take over to that board and make sure is raised. As well as more stuff about the merger. Yeah, it automatically screws up. Because the fact that it's not connected to, if it was all done through Teams, then whether it's a human booking it or an automated system, it would be able to look at it and go, oh yes, this person is teaching at this hour, I should not book any students for them. But because it's this completely separate system, it's like, yeah, this point on a Tuesday is fine. And it's a mess. And the staff are very upset and the students are very upset and the staff are upset on behalf of the students as well. So yeah, I took some notes on that. Took some notes on some interesting stuff about the merger, which we're understanding more and more as time goes on. Yeah. So I did that yesterday, but I didn't do very much else. I played some games. That was it. Yeah, I love these labor-saving devices that require you to double or triple your efforts to make sure they work. Yeah, basically, like, or the poor professional services and admin staff. There was someone who was some kind of administrative assistant. I can't remember what department she said she was in, who spoke up in the meeting and was like, they have grades. So she's like, I'm a grade 4 and I'm now expected to do the work of a grade 8. I've not been trained in this. But it's because they've gotten rid of so many of the people that they don't have anyone at that higher level anymore, and they're basically like expecting lower level people to do things that they don't know anything about. And that's not their fault. It's not her fault if she's asked to do something and she's never done it before, and then there's no one higher up to ask how to do it. Because the thing is, when you make all these people redundant, you eradicate like the localized knowledge. When you have a whole department, because you never normally would get rid of a whole department of people at once, but because of the scale of the redundancies that Kent is doing, it means that all of the like legacy knowledge vanishes in one go, or they take all of the responsibilities of one department and throw them to another department that's never done it before, and then take away the people that they could, or like isolate them from the people that they could ask for help with. It's a mess. To be clear, academically, I really like my institution. The staff are amazing. I have a lot of time and sympathy for the professional services and assistants we do have, because they are doing their best in a very, very shitty environment. And on top of all this, there's then the merger happening, and there's legal stuff around that people are worried about. Academia in the UK in 2025, everyone. Speaking of which, all right. Let's move us over, and I will talk. There's going to be a lot of talking today. I hope that's okay. Where am I going? I'm going to have to get rid of. Hold on. No, not that one. That could go back on. I know that there's a task list over my face right now. And the timer can go as well. Cool. Welcome back to Scrivener. It's been a while since we were here. Yeah, and the other really weird thing is like there's something about universities where they're not seen as like industries worth investing in. But I saw a statistic the other day that was like Tesco, which is like one of the biggest supermarkets here, employs like 150,000 people nationally, right? Universities employ 500,000. But I mean, the people in Tesco are also not treated well, just to be clear. But it was like, why? Yeah, we've got all of this huge industry that we're then the universities are not invested in or supported by the government, and it's a mess. Welcome to Scrivener. We are going to. I've got some notes that I wrote the other day that are in Obsidian, Obsidian is what I use as like my notebook. Not like my notes on stuff that I'm reading goes in my physical notebook. This is my like Evernote 60 million Sublime text tabs equivalent. And I took some notes because when I was, and I think I talked about this a little bit maybe, or I certainly posted on Blue Sky about it. When I was reading last week from the role-playing game studies book, they had some really good definitions at the start, right? And these definitions were like, what is a role? What is role play? What are the different kinds of role play? What is play? And in talking about and emphasizing play, it made me think like, currently the title of my thesis is representations of embodied madness in interactive media, but it could just as easily be in play, in playful media, in played media. And in fact, I often find myself leaning towards the word player when I'm talking about, the person engaging in the medium, even when it's fan fiction or, the other mediums that I've talked about. Excuse me. And the reason this is really interesting to me, and I was explaining this on Monday to my mentor is fantastic because she's not an academic like necessarily, but she knows enough about working with like neurodivergent people and has studied a lot of psychology or psychology adjacent things. So often when I'm talking about stuff, she gets like really interested and will ask me a lot of questions, but that's actually really useful to me because, as I've talked about with doing this stream, it's very helpful to me to have to explain what I'm doing. And in fact, in this book, there's a whole chapter on online text-based role-playing. Not muds or mushes or anything like that, but like the sort of thing that you're talking about, where it started on LiveJournal and it's now moved to like people do it privately in Discord or in MMOs or on Tumblr and things like that. It cited some that I've known about since like there was a reference to Millaway's Bar, which Millaway's Bar is a pan fandom role play that has been going on for like 20 years at this point, because I knew about it when I was a teenager and I applied to it, and I can't remember if I ever actually got a role in it. It started on LiveJournal, but the idea is that it's like a bar that exists between worlds, so you can be any character from anything. So you could conceivably in this bar have all of the doctors from Doctor Who alongside yeah, it's the restaurant at the end of the universe, basically. You could have them next to Gandalf, like, and what you would do is you would apply to be a particular character. And then you just, have conversations with really random like crossovers, and I always thought it was a really fun idea. Anyway, that's a tangent. I just got excited. The thing with talking about all of this in terms of play is it becomes really interesting when you consider that I am talking about madness, because one of the questions that my mentor had was, if you're saying that like you want people to be playful with the idea of madness, you're open to, you like the idea of people playing mad characters, what if someone does it badly? And so there's a whole lot of what ifs about this. First of all, one of which is is it a private game or is it streamed? Let's first of all assume it's a private game, because that makes it much easier. So assume it's a private game. You've then got multiple questions. First of all, the question is, what safety tools are present? And this is where my research on safety tools is really relevant, because it comes very much into... This one track is so quiet. I've turned the music up. I don't know if this will help. I don't know if that will be too loud. We'll see. Let me know if it is. So yeah, it depends on that. It depends on then how it's handled. Because the example I gave to her is one that I've given on stream before, which is, if the way that you come to roleplay a character is that you look at either the DSM directly, or you look at a website that's like, this is a description of schizophrenia, and you read the common traits for schizophrenia, the diagnosis, and you're like, oh, I want to play a character that is like this. No, I don't like the way you've gotten to playing the character. I think it would be better if you looked at schizophrenic people talking about being schizophrenic, for example, and their experience directly from them, not from a pathologizing document. But that doesn't mean that you can't learn a lot about the experience of madness from role playing that character. Like, just because something comes from that, or let's say you are role playing it and you get something wrong. You know, firstly, if no one at the table minds what you're doing, then and you've got their consent, then you're fine. And that's where the paper I read about, like, the crossover between BDSM and role-playing safety practice is really relevant, because that's a very, a clear example of, if people involved are consenting, it's okay, even if it's something that might be considered problematic or taboo otherwise. Obviously, that consent has to be, like, aware and not, like, retroactive or anything like that. Let's assume that consent is, like, given properly and maintained and upheld. And I gave the example of, and all of this is an ideal situation, and we do have to remember that people fuck up and people are messy, people can be assholes, all of that. There can be, like, table politicking at play, because maybe one of the characters is the DM's partner, and, all of this kind of thing. Any example I give is going to be, like, an ideal world. Let's say that you are at a table and someone is playing a character that, can be described as mad, and maybe one of their traits is that they lose control of their emotions, and that could include anger and violence. Not necessarily, like, portraying mad people as all violent, but that is an aspect of emotion, right? And let's say that you get into a scene where they threaten an NPC, and they threaten that NPC with sexual violence. I use this example because most of the tables I've been at, and a very large number of tables, don't accept any sexual violence present in the game in any way. It's a very common line, so it's a good example to use. Really, what matters is how it's handled. And I gave the example to my mentor of, this is the point where someone, the DM or another player, might play an X card, say a safe word, or whatever method your table has for stopping or pausing or slowing play. This is the sort of time where they'd use that. Ideally, they'd point out what happened. It is okay to need, like, a break, because especially if it's, like, a really emotionally charged scene, everyone at the table potentially could have some kind of, like, bleed effect going on because it can be very jarring to be yanked out of a very emotional scene. So, it's very much about how these things are handled after as well as before. And, maybe that person goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I just got really into it. And, it's one of those things that people threaten, and I'm so sorry and I won't do it again. Maybe we roll back the scene, or maybe we describe, what we think, how we think the scene went, and then we can move on to another scene. There's loads of different ways of handling that. It's not necessarily a problem. Hi, Blau. It's not necessarily a problem that person then continues to roleplay that character, and they've learned something from it. They, because they've in that moment of, becoming so intensely in character that they've broken an established rule. That is gonna, stick with them, teach them things, help them potentially. Like, I keep coming back to the quote from one of the articles I read about safety tools. This was the Cut and Brems article, which is that all roleplay is inherently risky. Safety tools are never seeking to completely eradicate risk, right? So, all of that said, oh, this has come through in Markdown. Of course it has. I'm just copying all of the notes that I have so far that I want to keep. Okay, so I'm gonna do something as well. This currently says there is a way for me to hold on. How do I rename a folder? Da, da, da. There must be a way for me to rename this folder. What? How do... I know how to use Scrivener, I promise. So if I click on this, it's going to lag a bit because it's got to load so much text. There's... Oh, it's just here. I'm going to provisionally call it Play and Risk. Let's do that. So this is a bunch of those things that I just talked about. Remembering that my concept of MAD is a very wide and open umbrella that includes neurodivergence. I'm not defining this in a way where I expect everyone to identify with it in a certain way. This is just my definition of madness for the purposes of my work. So in that vein, I'm thinking about the idea of mad joy from playfulness, because we think of play as a positive thing, right? The idea of madness as something that can be played with, I think, is something that people might have difficulty with, because there is this concept that all madness is suffering. In fact, let's be writing some of this down. Oh my god, do you ever just like put your fingers in completely the wrong place on your keyboard and then type? Zornria counters the idea that all madness is suffering. I'm thinking about when I was researching Senua's Sacrifice, and we were listening to all the service users that had served as advisors for the game production were talking about experiencing really beautiful hallucinations, and seeing like really colors really vividly, or a kind of movement in colors that was very like lovely, or the comfort of like some voice hearing. Obviously not all voice hearing is experienced in this positive way. Some of it's neutral, some of it's negative, even terrifying. But a lot of them were talking about like, no, I find the voices I hear help me, they're comforting, they are, you know, often like personified into friendships and things like that. Along that line, the joy of being unmasked is going to sound like a weird thing to talk about because we're talking about role-playing, right? You're putting on a mask inherently when you're role-playing. But for me, and for many other autistic people, it is very freeing because you are constructing that mask and choosing it, and it allows you to be sides of yourself you wouldn't normally feel okay expressing. I, in some ways, feel the most myself when I am being someone else. And it can be really, really freeing in that way. So let's also just add the note here of ability to behave in a way you wouldn't, and feeling most myself when someone else. We then have this idea of the freedom to make mistakes and be messy. I've just talked about that a little bit. It also ties into the idea that all role play is risky. Allows... Yeah, so I put allows learning. I'm just gonna fully copy this bit and put that in there. I and many people use role-playing as a deliberate seeking of bleed. I want to feel the things that my characters feel. I do have trouble sometimes with emotions because I have too many of them and I can't make sense of them. And in role playing, I'm able to much more clearly identify what those emotions are. It's kind of like practice for feeling things. And allows me to learn about emotions. So here's the thing. I still want to include all of this history. I still want to include the history of safety tools. I think probably the stuff about play is going to bookend as well as run through. You know, what's going on. And what was I going to say? The rest of that sentence vanished from my mind. Yeah, so I want to try today to turn this into a chapter plan, because the stuff I submit doesn't necessarily need to be like a fully fleshed out piece of writing. So this was my previous submission. It's going to take a second to load because it's a lot of text. This was my previous submission, which was the history of TTRPGs that we looked at, madness in TTRPGs. And the more I think about this, the more I'm like, oh, I have examples, because like I want to give. I'm going to put this in here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the freedom to make mistakes and be messy. I want to ref Call of Cthulhu, awful para on taking up space. People may or may not remember, when we looked through Call of Cthulhu, there was this paragraph about what role-playing... There was a section about role-playing insanity, as they describe it. And there was this paragraph like, what do you do as the DM if a player is getting so into playing their madness that they take up the whole table and derail everything? And it was written in a really infantilizing and awful way, where it just posed madness as the problem, being too mad as being a problem. It very much sounded like the way that people describe personality disorders, in a mean and nasty and unpleasant way. And so I want to like reference that as a no. No. So I want to do that as well. So yeah, basically I want to take all of this and start thinking about turning it into some kind of map for my arguments. So I think first of all, what I'm gonna this is good for notes, but I would like to turn it into some like statements of argument for the chapter. This is not something I've done before, and it's something I think I should do. We've now gotten loud on the music again. I'll turn that down. Yeah, so I want to try and do that. And yeah, we'll go from there. I need to get up and turn some more lights on because it's grey here. So give me just a second whilst I do that. I'm not moving too badly today, so hopefully it is all right. Right, that's all the lights I have. Well, except the big light. We don't turn the big light on. Not least because it's like directly above me. It's too much. All right. So Use my brain. Wake up, brain. Engage, please. No, I don't. I'm getting spam emails. My email twin had his car service today, and I know that because I got the receipt for it. I say Google is very bad if someone has an email address that has a full stop in or a period, a dot. It's very easy to miss that out, and then you've given someone else's email. So I not to my the email that's like my whole legal name is fine. The my original email that is named after a Ghostbuster gets a lot of email that it shouldn't do. Like the Zoom invite to someone's court hearing that I once got. Which I politely informed the lawyer involved about their massive breach of data confidentiality. You might not want to do this. Okay. So I'm trying to say welcome to watching me actually work, by the way, which is that there's a lot of pauses as I try and think of what I want to say. Role-playing games. Hang on. Definition. No, don't worry about that. I know what the definition is for now. I'm going to be saying role-playing games. I mean TTRPGs and LARPs. Those are the kinds of role-playing games that I'm talking about in this chapter. Obviously, role-playing games could mean a whole gamut of things. Role-playing games are a space in which people may explore the embodied experience of madness. I'm trying to avoid statements like can safely because of that statement that it's not inherently safe. Role-playing games are a space in which people may explore the embodied experience of madness because no. That is the base statement, and then the because is all of these other arguments I'm about to write down, isn't it? Role-playing allows the player to experience ways of being that are not necessarily natural to them, enabling them to I want to say learn and grow from the experience, but that sounds like I'm leaning into the edgelop like kind of idea. Role-playing allows the player to experience ways of being that are not necessarily natural to them. No. Oh, hang on. I just knocked my microphone. I apologise. I'll get rid of that one. Bleed is a powerful force by which a role player can experience an emotional world beyond their own, I think. This can be both positive and negative. No, no, because it can be neutral too. This, this experience is not inherently. No, I'm gonna leave anything. I'm not trying to write the whole thesis here. I'm trying to make clear statements. The problem is, I over-explain. I autistically over-explain because I'm so afraid of being misunderstood, which means it's very hard for me to be succinct. I never say that word. Because my instinct is like, I've got to make sure you know that I really understand what I'm talking about. So I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to spend 15 minutes explaining what I could have done in a single sentence if I had had the self-belief to just say, bleed is a powerful force by which a role player can experience an emotional world beyond their own. The experience of role-playing madness can be... I'm going to use the word transformative, I think. Both because it links back into the fanfiction chapter. I've just realised the chapters are not the way round I thought they were. I'm going to swap them. I'm going to do that in a minute because I know that lagged the shit out of things. The experience of role-playing madness can be transformative. Regardless of whether the depiction would be considered accurate or perfect. No, not perfect. Accurate or acceptable. It is important that role-playing madness does not harm others. And I think these sound contradictory. It's important that role-playing madness does not harm others, and there is a need for primary... Oh, what was the... Was it primary designers or primary... Hang on. I'm trying to think of a word. Authors. To better convey this. It is those who... Because I'm trying to also say... So there's the reason I said primary authors or primary authorship is there's this idea of primary, secondary, and tertiary authorship in terms of who creates a role-playing game. So the primary author is, if you're using a published TTRPG, the primary author is the people or the company that created the game. So the primary author of D&D is, well, technically Gary Gygax, but the primary author of D&D is, you know, Wizards of the Coast. The secondary author is the DM, and the tertiary author are the players. You all have some degree of authorship over a TTRPG. Okay. Therefore, when I'm saying primary authors, I mean like the published TTRPGs. These are not in order, by the way, these statements. The becoming and being of someone else can be liberatory for those who mask their madness as themselves, allowing them. I'm going to stop there because actually I was going to say allowing them to experience things they wouldn't be able to otherwise. We've already covered that. I don't think I need the as themselves qualifier. I'm going to take that statement. Role-playing is inherently risky, and safety tools cannot eradicate all risk. This does not mean that role-playing cannot be a safe space. And I'm going to put them like that, those statements like that, because what I'm saying is nowhere is 100% safe, but that doesn't mean it's not safe, if you see what I mean. It's sort of implying that you can take your definition of safe space to be as safe as possible, not there will be no harm that comes to you at all, because I think that's often what we think about when we think about what a safe space is that we think you know, no harm would possibly come to you here ever. But there is an argument, and I wish I remembered where I read this originally, because I brought it up before, and I do not know where I read it originally. There is an argument that black people and people of colour are never safe in a space where white people are allowed, which is true. They're never truly safe if white people are allowed to be present. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a safe space that is multiracial. It means that, true safety is not possible, but safety can still be possible. Absolute safety is not possible, is what I mean. There was a point I made, and we may be going beyond my core arguments now. I'm now just trying to make statements of things that I am wanting to make a point about in this chapter. There was something I said in mentoring of the idea of when there's probably a word for this, that when people are sad, they often go and seek out sad things. So sad films, sad music, sad whatever it might be, in order to fully experience their emotions. And I've made points about the emotions of characters being wholly separate to your own and being able to, have that bleed and feel things from that. What I'm now thinking is the other direction of bleed that can be positive of I come bearing these feelings that I would like to put into a character. I am sad, and so I would like to play this sadness out in a story. I just need to find the way to explain that. You can't hear that noise. Someone is doing something in the garden. I don't know whether it was the spokes of a bike turning or someone shaking a spray paint can, but it was very weird. And it also sounded like it was just behind me. The downside to living on the ground floor. Role-playing can allow people to process their own emotions by bringing them to... by bleeding them into their character. I could just stop there. I'm wondering if I do include the point about... I'll just put in the same way that sad people might listen to sad songs. Actually, no, maybe I won't use the word sad because it sounds silly. In the same way that people going through a breakup listen to... I nearly wrote Taylor Swift breakup songs. The same way that people go through a breakup listen to Taylor Swift. Okay. Have I got something about messiness? I kind of have, in the sense of like the risk factor. Role-playing games are a space in which people can fail and make mistakes with little to no consequence. I think I'll stop it there, because otherwise I could go on to like, this is important for learning. It is important to have a space in which... Okay, let's just set that aside for a moment. What is it that I want this chapter to be giving? So I know that I want this chapter to provide historiography of madness in TTRPGs and the safety tools that support them. That's one thing I want to provide. I also want to provide why do you not automatically bullet point things for me when I do that? Because that's that is a thing that the chapter will... I have to think about... Maybe this is weird, but I'm actually going to get up the... Is this the document that I'm looking for? Yeah. What to do before your Viva. Don't underestimate the accomplishment. Your focus for the past few years has been on undertaking your research and writing your thesis. Now that it's been submitted, take some time to congratulate yourself. I'm trying to look up the like things my thesis is meant to do in order to be successful, or provide in order to be successful. I don't think this is the right document. Think about how your work fits into a wider field of knowledge and how it makes an informed and original contribution to research in the area. So there isn't an existing historiography of madness in TTRPGs. There's lots of histories of TTRPGs, but none that specifically focus that I've found. I could be wrong. It's always possible. I've not read all of the writing on TTRPGs in the entire world. Also, I am looking at commercially published LARP as well, which is to say Mind's Eye Theatre, which is basically the only example of commercially published LARP, really. So, this is a thing that this chapter is providing. Clear idea about the strengths of your thesis. Refamiliarize yourself with the literature you have referred to in your thesis. Summarize the key arguments of books and articles that you have cited. There are so many citations in this thesis. Good God. Oh my God. I'm so scared of my Viva. I'm so scared. So basically, the way the Viva works. The Viva, for those who may not have heard the term before, is the thesis defense, or where people talk about defending their dissertation. It is me in a room with my supervisors and an internal and external examiner, and then the potentially also the director of graduate studies in the division, who is really nice. I've met him several times. He's lovely. Yeah, there's the one internal and one external examiner, and I get to not pick the external examiner, but I can make my supervisors can make suggestions basically. It's about 1.5 to 3 hours, and it is me talking. It's basically an interview about your thesis. I will be asking for breaks. I have an ILP, inclusive learning plan. Here are some basic questions that may crop up in some form. Why did you undertake your research? I like talking about things that I like. I like learning things. What key questions does your research try to answer? How did you go about selecting and designing your particular research methodology? I don't have one. Every chapter of my thesis has a different methodology. What might you have done differently if you could go back and do it again? That's a good question, actually. What would I do differently if I could go? I wouldn't get divorced in the middle of it. I wouldn't become more seriously ill. I don't think these things are what they want to hear. I would make sure I got funding before I started, and not just relied on the fact that at that point I was very financially solvent because of my partner, you know. I would find a magic lamp. Okay, this is the one I want. Academic regulations for research courses. Gotta find it. Regulations for research course of study. Here we are. This music we're listening to right now is from the Strange Antiquities soundtrack, and it's really good. It's a really good soundtrack. What the fuck is up with my bitrate today? I don't think it's it's very wiggly. I don't think it's been a problem. It's just been very wiggly. Degree of Master of Arts by research and thesis. Degree of PhD in all divisions. Yeah, I think technically I'm doing a PhD in humanities now. Maybe? I hope so, because that would be great. That's better for me. Okay. I'm not looking at admission. Period of study. Part-time PhD, 5 years minimum and 6 years maximum. Which means actually my minimum period is in April. I could finish before then. No, I'm not going to. I'm not going to. Here we are. Presentation of thesis. That's fine. That's just telling me. You can be exempted from the Viva. I don't feel like I need to be exempted from the Viva, but... Doctor of Philosophy. Here we are. Met the framework for higher education qualification level descriptor for a doctorate degree. Oh, God. Met any subject-specific assessment criteria outlined in the course specification, if applicable. Shown appropriate ability in the organisation and presentation of their material in the thesis. The FHEQ in England, Wales and Northern Ireland states that doctorates are awarded to students who have demonstrated. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. The creation and interpretation of new knowledge through original research or other advanced scholarship of a quality to satisfy peer review extends the forefront of the discipline and merit publication. Do think good. Good thinking. A systemic acquisition and understanding of a substantial body of knowledge which is at the forefront of an academic discipline or area of professional practice. So in that sense, demonstrating that I understand how play works within role-playing games is important for this chapter. The general ability to conceptualize, design, and implement a project for the generation of new knowledge, applications, or understanding at the forefront of the discipline, and to adjust the project design in the light of unforeseen problems. I think I've probably done that pretty well, actually. I have a lot of problems. Typically, holders of the qualification will be able to make informed judgments on complex issues in specialist fields, often in the absence of complete data, and to be able to communicate their ideas and conclusions clearly and effectively to specialist and non-specialist audiences. That's one of the positives that I have, which is that one of the strengths of my writing is that it's very accessible in the sense of non-specialists being able to read it. In the book that I've been reading, Role-Playing Game Studies, they do because there's a lot of terminology in role-playing that is, specific to it. They actually just had a whole section that was like, these are terms that you're going to hear. So they explained what D number means. They were like, this is a die with that many sides. So if you see D20, it's a 20-sided die. Except when it's dimension 20. So I'm gonna do something like that at the start, I think, because I think that will help save me having a footnote every 3 paragraphs because I need to explain a new term. Continue to undertake pure and or applied research and development at an advanced level, contributing substantially to the development of new techniques, ideas, or approaches. Yeah. Will have the qualities and transferable skills necessary for the employment, requiring the exercise of personal responsibility and largely autonomous initiative in complex and unpredictable situations in professional or equivalent environments. Be good at things. A candidate may not present a thesis for examination earlier than 3 months before the end of the minimum period of registration. Actually, is my minimum period... Hang on. I should look at this stuff more. Because I'm now, is my... is the 1st of April 2027 my early... that date? My PGR. My PGR details. Minimum... here we go. minimum period of registration ends 1st of April 2026. Full period of registration is the 1st of April 2027. Expected completion is 1st of April 2027. Exciting. Original thesis submission deadline 31st of December 2024. I was full-time when I started, so some of it looks weird. Next stage review meeting, end of minimum period of registration review. That's scary. This thesis has to be done. All right. Let's stop looking through that. That has actually helped me think about things a little bit. So I do want to demonstrate the function of play in role-playing games and how it interacts with madness. I want to consider, not consider, show small case studies of mad characters in actual play. I have a couple of examples for that already. And gotta find the wording for this. Demonstrate the significance of madness to role-playing, to and within role-playing, such that further research may be undertaken. Because a lot of that is what my thesis is doing, is not going, here is everything you need to know about this one particular thing. A lot of this thesis is me going, have you considered these spaces in which people haven't thought about madness before? Would you like to think about madness in them? Because I would. Here's a little bit of thinking about madness in them so that, you know, I can, like, give you a leg up, as it were. Okay. I do have another task that I need to do today as well, so we may move on to that in a moment too. I'm probably also going to take a break just for a few minutes shortly. In fact, why don't I do that now? I'm going to take a break now, and then I'll come back and we're going to work on my abstract submission for the Mad Studies Conference Day, which I'm excited about. But I need to think through what I want my example to be. And I'll need to get a book down as well, so I can do that during the break too. And that will actually help me with thinking about this chapter a bit as well, because it is related. Okay, I'm gonna put the Be Right Back screen up. I'll be just a few minutes. I'm just gonna, move around a bit, stretch, find this book and so forth. Not be on a screen. not be on a camera for a bit. Please stretch, look away from your screen, get water, a snack, whatever you need to do, and I'll be back in just a moment. my microphone was muted, but actually muted this time. I was just saying that I went and got this book, and it was next to Alice Wong's memoir. And Alice was an incredible disability activist who passed away a couple of weeks ago. And I've got so many of my books behind me either have her writing in or were organized by her. And she's probably like the activist most responsible for turning me into the scholar and activist that I am today. So that was sad, but also, I've learned a lot from her, and I'm very grateful on this day of gratitude and colonialism. It's nice to be grateful. Okay, so Arthur Frank. Let me move us off this as well, because I don't have... What do I have that we could write in? Because I don't have... Honestly, you know what? I'm just going to bring us over here. Give me just a moment and I will change what is and isn't visible. It's me! Hello, I'm back. We're going to move me over here a bit. Yeah, it is sad. Give me just a moment whilst I move all of this around. I need these positions so that when I do want to hide things like this, it's okay. Alright. I'll do this because this will be easier, and then you can sort of see what I'm doing. I will then be taking notes as well. But this way you can see kind of what's going on. Give me just a moment to that's SAB stuff. Oh, I needed to put that in there actually. Not teaching, conferences, and this is the, oh my god, what's it called? Hang on, it's in my work email. Do you want £2,000 towards your postgraduate studies? Yes, Figments. Figments is the name of the... I do want it, but I've entered your raffle, but your bursary raffle every year for the past 6 years, and I've never won. So, poorpostgrad.com. They're trying. Okay. My thesis is based around this idea that the embodied experience of madness can be expressed through these different media types, and it looks at how we do that. One of the bits of theory, illness narratives theory, this is done in relation to, is this book here by Arthur W. Frank, called The Wounded Storyteller. Frank wrote a bunch of things about illness narratives and his narratives of illness through his life. He was a sociologist who went through, I think, 2 bouts of cancer, and it led him to shift his focus from what he had been working on in research to thinking about illness narratives. He poses that there are several different kinds of narrative. An example of this is the recovery narrative. This is the narrative of illness that we are most exposed to, because it's the one most in line with that idea of turning us into inspiration porn. And also the idea, it goes with an idea of illness as acute rather than chronic. You become ill, go to a medical professional, are given treatment, and then recover. That is the recovery narrative. And even with things like cancer, there is an adherence to the recovery narrative to the detriment of people who go through cancer, because often cancer recurs. Cancer is talked about, and this is a different theorist, but cancer is talked about in terms of war, in illness as warfare. This is talked about. Where it's the idea of, you're a cancer warrior, you're winning the fight, but what if you lose? What about the people who aren't able to be treated because either their cancer's identified too late, or it's an aggressive kind, they've got other health conditions that mean that the treatment is less effective, or whatever it may be, and the knock-on effect that then has on those people when it's described in that way. One of Frank's narratives of illness is the chaos narrative. Chaos, and in fact, let me read his description of it to you. Chaos is the opposite of restitution. Its plot imagines life never getting better. Stories are chaotic in their absence of narrative order. Events are told as the storyteller experiences life, without sequence or discernible causality. The lack of any coherent sequence is an initial reason why chaos stories are hard to hear. The teller is not understood as telling a, quote, proper story. But more significantly, the teller of the chaos story is not heard to be living a, quote, proper life, since in life as in story, one event is expected to lead to another. Chaos negates that expectation. So his argument, here we go. Chaos stories are also hard to hear because they are too threatening. The teller of chaos stories is preeminently the wounded storyteller, but those who are truly living the chaos cannot tell in words. To tell the chaos into a verbal story is to have some reflective grasp of it. This sentence here, to turn the chaos into a verbal story is to have some reflective grasp of it, is the statement that my thesis is protesting. It's not that I'm not like here going, oh my god, Frank's completely full of shit, because he's not. I actually think that there are narratives of illness that do represent, are described as describable as chaos. They do. I'm so sorry, I left my work email open. They do take this form. He gives this example from an interview fragment where a carer is describing caring for her mother who has Alzheimer's. And he describes this story as hard to hear because there's no narrative sequence. It is, and this is a quote, only an incessant present with no memorable past and no future worth anticipating. And we'll come back to that idea of it being very present tense. But just to read you the quote that he thinks is so hard to hear, it's this. And if I'm trying to get dinner ready and I'm already feeling bad, she's in front of the refrigerator. Then she goes to put her hand on the stove and I've got the fire on, and then she's in front of the microwave, and then she's in front of the silverware drawer. And if I send her out, she gets really mad at me, and then it's awful. That's when I have a really bad time. That made perfect sense to me. It's not, it's just someone talking. It's Arthur. It's just a person talking. It's not. But I think what is recognizable about it is it feels sometimes when I'm excited, and even just like this, I try to get 10 ideas out at once, and then my words get all jumbled and I talk really fast and it doesn't quite make sense, but it does all make sense and I am able to pull it together at the end into a way that makes sense. And sometimes when the reason I want to come back to this idea of present tense is because, to me, the single most present tense thing in my disability experience is meltdowns. There is nothing that yanks me more into my physical self, but also yanks me out of thought, but also then traps me in that thought. It's really contradictory. I'm at one point completely severed from my physical being and also indelibly tied to it. Really intense pain is like this for me as well. I don't have control of myself, but I also think that maybe I do. You know, I'm trapped in this kind of like limbo third space, but one that is so focused on the present and definitely is an incessant present with no memorable past and no future worth anticipating, because when you're in that kind of state, you can't necessarily see a way out of it. And lots of aspects of my mad experience are like this. I also see the chaos narrative as much more reflective of chronic illness, because of that. It's this intersection with the idea of crypt time and of experiencing time differently, and how you don't necessarily have a discernible past or desirable future, and you have all of these things overlapping and contending with each other, and it is messy. But I don't think it's inexpressible. So, what I want to do for this abstract is I want to take Frank's chapter on chaos, and I want to demonstrate how a chaos narrative works with a mad narrative. The question I have is, what is the best example to use to do that? Because the idea I had, chaos embodied. He's got a whole, yeah, I remember now. He then goes on to say that, like, you can have a glimpse of chaos. Like, obviously that interview that he's referencing is you can witness it and experience it. I think my problem is I think he places too much emphasis on words as a way of expressing a narrative, and too much emphasis on chronology and the adherence to a linear chronology. I think there are plenty of examples of narratives that jump around with time in a way that is very effective. And I think you can yeah, he describes chaos as the pit of narrative wreckage. It can be, but I don't think that that means that there's nothing useful there. I think he's being very absolutist, and I would like to counter that. My kind of model for what I want to do is Lamar Jarrell Bruce's chapter on mad time, where he describes his concept of mad time using various kinds of black music as an example. 1 second, because I'm getting really cold and I need to turn my heating on. For the phone. The fact that I can turn my heating on from my phone, by the way, means that on my way home from places I can heat it up. I can also turn it on and then put it on a timer, so I can say you're allowed to be on for 2 hours and then you can turn off. So I would love to do something like that. What I want to think about is the best example to use. I'm open to using weird examples. I'm definitely wanting to think of something that is temporally messed up. I'm but more so than like just some flashbacks. I think if I can think of an example that is completely all over the place chronologically, that would be great. I'm looking at like all the books I have now, just trying to think about things that I know and enjoy. And are they what of the things that I like is the most messy? It's probably a video game. I feel like I'm looking at a sort of. I don't want to use the ones I've already been published on, or I'm being published on. So I don't want to use Critical Role or Cyberpunk 2077. Ideally, because I'm already talking about those in other publications. A lot of the examples of things that I've got are very like the past coming to be relevant. There was a part of me that thought about using the Dark Urge in Baldur's Gate 3 as a way of expressing a chaos narrative. Hang on, could I use Claire Obscure? No, it's too... I don't want to spoil Expedition 33 for people, but I'm now wondering if I can use that as an example. But I'm also I'd love to have something that is the realization that Doki Doki Literature Club kind of fits. No, I don't want to go for something that's too complicated, because that's messing with perception and agency, and I don't want something like that. I want something that is simpler if still then messy. I'm just looking through my Steam library just because I have so many games in here that are from me looking for. I feel like there could be some visual novels that fit this. I'm trying to sort of think of narratives where you are trusted to work out what is going on, not, you're not necessarily fed, because that tends to have like more of an inherent mess with continuity to it. I mean, I could use Slay the Princess again, in addition to it being in my thesis, but since I've already written that chapter, that feels a bit oh yes, The Sims. That's definitely an example of what I'm thinking of. There are some games on here that I don't know where I got them. God, because the thing is, I could use writing as well. I've got memoirs, but the thing is that memoirs tend to inherently have a chronology to them because you are relating a history. Yeah. I mean, I may be into poetry at this point. This is the thing, is I want to write this abstract but I just don't know exactly what I'm wanting to use for it, and that's a problem. I could look at sorry, this is going to be a lot of me like staring into nothingness and thinking. I think the thing is, it kind of feels like when I find the right thing, it'll click and be really obvious. Let me look at I'm just looking at stuff on the Dark Urge. Again, I'm going to also try not to spoil too much of this. Because I think the reason I think the Dark Urge is interesting potentially for this, one, Baldur's Gate is a big enough game. Baldur's Gate 3 is a big enough game that it will be like recognizable to people at this day potentially, because it's not like a video game studies day, it's a mad studies day. So I'm wondering, I'm not going to spoil like the plot of the Dark Urge plot, but I'm going to talk about some things around it. So if you want to know absolutely nothing, I don't mind you leaving. Because one of the things I've got open in front of me is the quest. So as the Dark Urge, you get a quest called the Urge. And they do not look like normal quests. So the first, because I'll read you the first one, because there's no like story spoilers here other than that you have a Dark Urge. The first quest is called Be Yourself, Think Dirty Thoughts. And then it says, special, yes, special, aren't you? Shush, don't fight it. You know what you need to do. Take up that knife, do what you do best. Easy as breathing. You'll feel better after. You really can't help it, can you? These vile things you do, don't you wonder why you're doing them? You must really have been an awful person before the crash. Perhaps it's better that you forget about it, but you want to know, don't you? This, and a lot of the, I was slightly, yeah. You can mute. And I was slightly horrified when I did this quest. And it's very... I'm just looking at compilations of all of the lines as well. there's specific race and class descriptions or like things that you think about. You can like self-reflect. I'm also thinking about the way that they have the narrator change for the Dark Urge playthrough. Also the fact that it's very okay. Sorry, this is probably very uninteresting to watch. The thing that makes me hesitant is that the Dark Urge is all about violence. But it is also really good examples of intrusive thoughts. And like very horrifying things. Oh, and also the amnesia. Maybe I'll think about it. Maybe I'll look at some. I want to look at some videos of the cutscenes, I think, to consider whether this one works, but it could do. But I'm going to stop talking about that now. That is one option. Other options include because a lot of the examples that I think of do things to do with memory, which often brings in the past in some way, making it, you know, sort of breaking out of that chronology a little bit. I'm really trying to think of things that are very present tense. It also could be that I don't use a media example for this one and I just talk about it in terms of theory. But I do like using examples of media as, you know, things things to do with that. What I think I will do is I'm going to type some of these quotes from here up. So we'll have I'm wondering also whether actually looking at something like actual play, I know I just said I don't want to do Critical Role again, but actually actual play could be a really good example because it's improvised and therefore there is an inherently like there's a present tenseness about it. So I'm now wondering if there's examples I can think of where it's very. But I can think of examples, but I don't want to go too niche, so this doesn't get accepted. Is the problem? If it's so niche that it feels really weird to have it there, then it won't get accepted. I can speak. Accepted. Discernible is a word that I can't spell, apparently. Writing more of these quotes. That's the one about turning it into a verbal story. We'll have an incessant present with no memorable past and no future worth anticipating. It's so funny because the descriptions that he uses just sound so, and I remember feeling that the first time I read this, like 6 years ago at this point, that it really stuck with me because it sounded like the description of how I feel when I'm in a really mad space. He also does argue that, like, in terms of like clinicians working with people experiencing chaos, that they need to be more tolerant of it, and like he's like arguing that like chaos stories show how quickly the props that other stories depend on can be kicked away. The limitation is that chaos is no way to live. And he does point out that once you pull someone out of chaos, you pull them into restitution inherently because you've pulled them into recovery. I'm just going to write this bit. We kicked away. Oh, the limitation is that chaos is no way to live. Okay. He cited someone called Hilfiger, and for some reason, like at a glance, it looks like it says Hitler, and I was very confused for a moment. Okay. Oh, it's warm. Oh, it's leading towards the heater. Don't mind me. Let's push you back here a bit now, because it's moving that so you can still hear me, but also I can open this. Because he uses music, he uses comedy, he uses film, all kinds of things. So, I mean, I do like that idea of using something, a medium that is in some way improvised, because it will be less edited at that point. It's just a case of finding an example that works. If, as I say, I want to use an example at all. Yeah. Well, I will think about it more. I think at the moment I just need to like let it sit in my brain. I am I'm again looking up at my books. I'm probably gonna leave the stream here. I was gonna see if I could go beyond 2 hours, and actually I feel like I could, but also I don't feel like I have anything more to say. Thanks for listening to me talk about stuff for 2 hours if you've been here the whole time, or a portion of it if you've been here some of the time. I will be back again tomorrow at the same time. We will do some more studying then. More of like the writing up the thesis stuff we were doing today. This is really just to keep this in the forefront of my mind. The deadline is in 2 weeks and a bit, like just over 2 weeks, so I've got time to think about it more. I would like to be able to show it to my supervisor first to get her thoughts on it, because I'd really like to get this place. Yeah, that's it. We'll be back tomorrow. On Saturday, we'll also be here. We're excitingly looking at vanilla Minecraft things, because Mojang have now announced the date for the next update release, which means plans are a go for restarting my vanilla server. So we're going to have a look at the seed that I've picked so I can work out where I want to put my base, and then I'm going to start doing some designing for it. So that will be our gaming for the week on Saturday. But for now, thank you so much everyone for being here. Please take care of yourselves and each other. I love you very much. And I almost said, is it Thursday yet? It is Thursday today. So I guess that works. But yes, thank you very much, everyone. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.